Alright, Common Core Algebra 2, our next section in Chapter 4 is going to be returning to factoring quadratics, but now a is not going to be 1. So it's going to be any other number, just not 1. So it'll look more like the form ax squared plus bx plus c. We're going to do similar things to fact in the sense that we're still looking at numbers that add up to b, but we have a couple minor changes. Okay, your first steps is, this is one of the big differences, you're going to multiply a times c now. And so that product is what we're going to take the factors of that will sum to b. So we want the numbers, after they multiply to ac, any numbers that add up to b, and multiply to a times c. This is something called the AC product method. Okay, after you get those factors of AC that sum to b, you're going to unsimplify. So we are going to rewrite the quadratic with these factors, and you're going to create 4 terms. So what that means is before we had 1, 2, 3 terms. Now when we do this and we multiply, we find those factors, we're going to unsimplify this so that we have 4 terms. It's going to look more complicated at first in order to get a more simple or more reasonable answer. Okay, after we do those 4 terms, we're going to take and we're going to group things. So we're going to do something called factor by grouping. We're going to group our first 2 terms, and we're going to group our last 2 terms, and then we're going to find the GCF of both of those sets of numbers. Once we have that GCF, we're going to pull it out, and we should have the same thing left over in both parentheses. And you'll see more of what that means in the example in a minute. So we're finding the GCF of the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same GCF for both. And then finally, you're going to rewrite as a factored polynomial. Now, anytime we rewrite something as a factored polynomial, especially a trinomial, it is going to be the product of 2 binomials, remember. Okay, and it's just going to be like 2 things added together, where these last 2 have to multiply to c, and these first 2 have to multiply to a. Okay, so they're going to multiply to a. Now, it doesn't mean that each one is a. It means that when you multiply the 2 together, you get a. Okay, what this looks like in an example, if we want to do a times c, we're going to take 2a times 3c, and so we get that ac is 6. Well, now I want the factors of ac that sum to b, and you'll see here that b is a negative 7. So I'm going to go ahead and write 6, and then start listing out factors. Okay, so I know 2 and 3, I know 1 and 6, and 2 plus 3 is 5, so that doesn't work. 1 plus 6 is 7, so that's close, but we need a negative 7. And the reason here is, much like the last video, if we have a positive 1 and a positive 6, that gives us positive 6. But if we also think of things in terms of negative 1 and negative 6, still gives us positive 6 and adds to negative 7. So these are the 2 values we want that are factors of AC and sum to b. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my quadratic again down here. I have 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. Okay, and when I say rewrite now, this time, this is the one where I was talking about I want 4 terms. And what I'm going to do is unsimplify that middle term. I don't want negative 7x. I want a negative 1x plus a negative 6x. And that negative 1 and negative 6 came from that previous box that we filled out. Nothing else is going to change. So I'm going to rewrite my 2x squared in the beginning, and I'm going to write my plus 3 at the end. Okay, and then finally I'm going to rewrite those in, well, not finally, but I'm going to rewrite those in groups. So I'm going to group my first 2 terms, 2x squared minus 1x plus, and then my second 2 term, negative 6x plus 3. Okay, what I want to do here is factor the greatest common factor from those first 2 terms. So you'll notice the only thing that we have in common in those first 2 terms is an x. And so if I factor out an x, I get an x and a 2x minus 1. Okay, and the other one, I can divide them both by 3. Now here's a little hint. Anytime that first one is negative, factor out a negative as well. So I'm actually going to do a greatest common factor of a negative 3. And remember, this means division. So negative 6 divided by negative 3 is going to leave us with 2x, and 3 divided by negative 3 is a negative 1. Okay, here's the other important piece. We need these 2 things to be the same. When they are the same, we are good and we are ready to write our answer. That is going to be your first binomial. Remember, the whole point was find 2 binomials. So I rewrite my 2x minus 1, and then my other thing is going to come from whatever those 2 greatest common factors were. That is the other factor. and I can rewrite that as an x minus 3. And so when I factor that quadratic, I get this. 2x minus 1, the quantity 2x minus 1 times x minus 3. And that is it for this lesson. A lot more detailed than the previous one when a is 1. But when a is not 1, as long as you follow those same steps every time, you will get the right answer. We'll see you next time.